Welcome back to the Choate Morning Answer with John Anthony. Let me tell you something, guys. Hank Choate represents something Michigan cannot, I repeat, cannot afford to lose. He's the kind of man who rises in the dark, works land that has fed this state for generations, and believes that his civic duty matters just as much as his crop yield. He's a farmer who feeds families, a community anchor, and a citizen who stepped into the role of elector because he trusted the system. What happened next should concern every Michigander. A man who never sought the spotlight suddenly became a cautionary tale in the political climate that treats ordinary citizens as enemies for participating in the process. He was indicted not because he committed a crime, but because he stood in the wrong place during the wrong political moment. Today, we talk not only about his livelihood and his land, we talk about what it means when government power reaches into the lives of everyday people. We talk about the cost of speaking up and the courage of staying in the fight. Hank Choate is here not as a symbol, but as a living testimony to the stakes of this moment in Michigan. Hank, he's a Michigan farmer, small business owner, community leader, and 2020 elector. Yeah, I said it proud. Hank Choate is a lifelong Michigan farmer whose family farm has stood for decades as a pillar of agriculture in our state. He has weathered droughts, market swings, regulations, and that daily grind that most people never see. His commitment to faith, community, and civic duty led him to serve as a 2020 elector. Hank, welcome to Detroit's Morning Answer.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Now, Hank, before we get into all of the political things, I think I love to paint the humanity of people. Most people have no idea, Hank, of how fragile Michigan agriculture has become. From your vantage point, what is the single greatest threat to the survival of family farms in Michigan over the next decade?
Overreaching regulation, plain and simple.
This is what I've heard. I got a guy who comes on. He wrote a book about small farmers and families, and that's the number one thing that he talks about. But, who is Hank Choate, and how did you get involved in becoming an elector in the 2020 election?
Okay, simply put, is that I tell people is that I consider myself very lucky that I'm still on my first job. And so I've had the luxury of being part of a family that has a family legacy in Michigan. We date back to 1837, and we still own that property where my family homesteaded in 1837. So we're 12 years away of 200 years of continuous ownership. And I take that as a privilege and as an honor. And so I've always been active in our industry, representing agriculture as an advocate, everything and so forth. And so in 2010, I was becoming concerned that the privileges that I had as a young adult is that my grandchildren would not have. And so that was concerning to me. And so that's how I got started in the Republican Party of Jackson County. And then it's just kind of gone from there.
Yeah. Now, for listeners who don't know the timeline, when were you indicted? What were the charges? And what made those charges historically unprecedented?
So if I remember correctly, I want to say it was July of 23, I believe it was. And to be quite honest with you, is that the way I found out about it is that I had a telephone call from an individual that I know and called and said, "What is this I hear about you being indicted?" And I says, "I don't know."
Wow.
I said, we're busy harvesting wheat. I have not been near any radio, any telephone, and so forth. But so that's how I found out. But reality-wise is that there were 8 charges that were brought against the 16 of us. And so I have to believe that the Dana Nessel, in my opinion, basically overreached and established those 8 charges even before she read the report of the investigator that she had investigating us. But having said that, I feel that we've been vindicated by the court system, because on September 9th of 2025, Judge Christina Simmons from the city of Lansing read the ruling to us and exonerated all of us in regard to all 8 charges and so forth. So,
Hank, I can only imagine what it felt like. What was the most surreal moment for you? Was it the day you learned that you were charged, or the day you saw your name in the headlines, or was it the moment you realized the state was treating you as a criminal for performing a constitutional role?
When you talk about the most surreal moment was the day that, for me anyways, was sitting in the courtroom when Judge Simmons read the ruling of dismissing all 8 cases against us. And the reason why that was most surreal to me is that going into that day, going through the 7 days of preliminary hearing, I felt that we were, vindicated by the evidence that was presented to the judge. But in today's climate, you always have in the back of your mind, is this going to be a political decision, or is this going to be a decision that followed the evidence and followed the letter of the law? And so I went into that morning with a little bit of apprehension, but following her remarks is that it became clear to me where she was going to go. And so it was a moment of, I want to say, a moment of reinforcement of the rule of law, and the judicial system can work if we have a judicial system that is not blind, that looks at the evidence and makes a determination in regard to following the evidence as it follows the law.
Hank Choate, when you look at the legal process, it's not just stressful; it's destructive. How did the indictment impact your farm, your finances, your family, and I'm always concerned about this, your mental health?
Well, I'm not going to deny it wasn't on our minds. I think it affected other electors more so than myself. I had a strong belief that we did nothing wrong. What we did that day on December 14th of 2020 was to produce and provide an alternate slate of electors. That was our belief when we did what we did. That was reinforced when you listen to the evidence that Howard Schock, the investigator of Dana Nessel, in his 6-page sworn affidavit, stated that on paragraph 35, Sean Flynn, who was a team member of Team Trump, addressed the 16 electors that morning and clearly stated that your objective today is to produce an alternate slate of electors.
Right.
And so, like I say, that was in the sworn affidavit of the investigator of Dana Nessel. And so once I heard that, I was truly convinced in my mind, no matter whether we were bound over for a jury trial or not, that a jury of our peers would find each and every one of us innocent. Having said that, financial stress, I know what my attorney fee, each and every one of us had to have our own individual attorney. And I know what my attorney cost me. And as I take and know that some of the other electors had a much higher expense on legal fees, but as I do a rough calculation, that the electors had a legal expense that placed a dollar value of between $1.5 and $1.7 million liability on all of us and everything. And that was nothing more than weaponization of the legal system by Dana Nessel.
Is there recourse on trying to get that money back, or because that's a lot of money, and this is one of the reasons why I believe they started using this lawfare warfare on everyday citizens. And President Trump said it best: "They're not after me; they're after you. I'm just standing in the way." I don't understand, Hank, how so many people don't understand that they tried it on Trump so that they can see how they can do it on just average, everyday, hardworking Americans. What do you say about that?
What I say about that is that should be a concern to each and every one of the listeners that you have on your show, whether they are conservative, whether they are Democrat, progressive, or whether they're independent, is that the weaponization demonstrates that the weaponization of financial intimidation, emotional intimidation is completely wrong. It does not follow the constitutional, when I say guidelines that was set out by founding fathers. And my greatest fear is that, yes, there needs to be justice in regard to that weaponization, but this weaponization, in my opinion, is a cancer that will, if not stopped, will destroy our government system. But having said that, is that they started this program, they brought it upon us. I'm not looking at weaponizing them so much as that bringing justice in the wrongdoing that was placed upon us or that could be placed upon any American citizen.
You know, Hank, alternate or these contingent electors have been used before in disputed elections. I think about Hawaii in 1960, the multiple states in the 1876 Hayes-Tilden dispute, and then there was a lot of early electoral college conflicts in the 1700s. Did anyone in the media or the state government ever acknowledge these precedents? Because they were calling it unprecedented misconduct by you guys. Did anybody ever bring this up?
In regard to those that were challenging us, or those that wanted to
in the courts?
To us?
Did Nessel bring it up? Did the courts bring it up?
In the preliminary hearing that I sat through, it was not brought up until it was just kindly briefly discussed by the judge in the ruling that she read and everything. And so again, it brings back to the point that you talk about what difference there may have been, and the difference that I see is in 1960 in regard to the case between JFK and Nixon, is that you had the election first went towards the Republicans. You had the Democratic electors that put together an alternate slate of electors. In 2020, you had a Democrat that was showing as winning the election in the state, and then you had Republican conservative electors that put together an alternate slate of electors. And so the difference there is in 1960, you had the press, you had the Democrats that were simply stating this is an alternate slate of electors. In 2020, what you had is you had the Democrats and you had the press that was front and center that they were fake electors. Wow. Even after the ruling was read by Christina Simmons, and even to this day, as you read an article in the press, we are referenced as fake, fraudulent electors, rather than telling the truth that we were fulfilling a constitutional right that we had in producing an alternate slate of electors that could have been used and only used if there had been circumstances that had overturned the election in Michigan. And we even stated that day in regard to press releases that was in the investigator's report. What we did that day had no bearing unless that the court or something had overturned the election than that.
Wow. You know, I think people really do need a civics lesson because it was incumbent upon Congress to decide what electors they should have chosen. And of course, I mean, those people in all those cases we just mentioned, there was no criminality involved, or nobody was indicted on any of those things. So that's what really ticks me off. How did the community rally around you, or did you lose friends? Did you lose supporters because of this?
It's been kind of I would say, I don't know as if I've lost friends. I've had even some family members that asked the question, how could you have done anything like that? I said, what do you mean, done anything like that? We did nothing wrong. All we did was produce an alternate slate of electors. We just made an alternate slate of electors that was available if extenuating circumstances. So in regard to how could you have done that, we did nothing wrong. And so in regard, there's been an outpouring of support even before, I should say, after the charges that were brought against us, and also even after the ruling by the judge and so forth. So I cannot state enough that it was rewarding to have a little bit of faith and confidence put back into me and my fellow electors that we had a judicial system that was following the evidence against the charges that were brought against us, and there was nothing suggested that we did anything criminal.
Well, I'll tell you this. I know you're my good friend, and I know he's your good friend. Vance Patrick has been believing in you from day one, and he said, John, you got to get him on the air. And I said, just send me the information, and I'll put him on as soon as possible. Hank Choate, local Michigan farmer and elector to the 2020 elections. Now that the dust has settled, what reforms do you believe Michigan should adopt to protect citizens from these type of political prosecutions?
I guess in regard to reforms is the best thing is electing an attorney general that follows the law rather than having a vindictiveness of going after anybody that serves or represents the opposite side of the aisle that she does. I was told at the very onset of Dana Nessel's nomination for Attorney General is that the Democrats just gave the Republicans an opportunity. Well, that may have been an opportunity, but because of the unwillingness of them to be completely forthfront in representation of the individuals that we were electing, Dana Nessel got elected. And more than once, she has demonstrated again and again that she is a vindictive person rather than a person that is elected to represent and protect all of Michigan's citizens, whether you're Democrat, progressive, Republican, conservative, or independent. And so in regard to the process that needs to be put in place is that make certain that when you elect people, is that you elect people that are going to follow the letter of the law rather than trying to, indict a ham sandwich, which is what I felt she did.
Yeah.
Is she and I cannot say strongly enough that after setting through 7 days of preliminary examinations and my elementary understanding of the law, but the evidence that the 6-page sworn affidavit that the investigator presented to Dana Nessel is that she had her mind made up which way she was going to go long before that evidence came to her.
Yeah. Hank Choate, I think I know the answer to this question. After everything you have endured, what anchors you? What keeps you grounded and willing to speak publicly when many people would have retreated and said, it's over, so I'm just keeping quiet? What grounds you? What anchors you?
I guess what grounds me more than anything else is that my strong belief in our Constitution, in our structure of government, that every person is considered innocent rather than guilty. And so I'm a strong person in regard to my beliefs of what our founding fathers created and gave to us. And I will stand by that. Like I said, what got me involved in government or in politics was the fact that I was recognizing that my grandkids were not going to have opportunities as young adults. So I'm firmly believing is that we as a society will help those that are in need. We as a society will give opportunities that want to seek and grasp an opportunity. But I'm also a strong believer that humanity, myself and others, giving all of the facts, will follow that philosophy of we will help those that are in need and give opportunity to others that are willing to seek that opportunity.
Amen. Hank Choate, when your story is told years from now, what do you want future generations to learn from the farmer who became a target for doing his duty?
Oh, gosh, that's a question I really haven't given a great deal of thought to, but I guess what I would say is that our founding fathers demonstrated courage in standing up against the forces of the British Empire. And people have asked me, why don't you just walk away from this and everything and so forth? And I always came back, I said, that's an interesting question, because I could have maybe agreed to cooperate with Dana Nessel and avoided the financial burden that's been placed upon me. But that is not my I want to say character. And so the thing that I want to be left behind is that when you are right, when you have been wronged, again, do the same thing that our founding fathers did. Stand with courage. I try to instill upon my grandkids in a simple saying that I put to them. And that saying is, live with courage and kindness. And what that means is don't be afraid to step outside of your comfort zone, but also make certain as you approach, I want to say, issues in life, as you interact with people, try to make first and foremost that your response to them is respect and kindness.
Hank Choate, Michigan farmer, elector to the 2020 elections. Thanks so much for joining us on Detroit's Morning Answer this morning.
Thank you very much, and have a great day, sir.
All right. We'll be praying for you. You hear that? That sounds like a strong patriot to me. A man who stood with courage. We need more truth tellers and people with the spine of courage today more than ever. Thank you, Vance, for that interview. Detroit's Morning Answer. We'll be right back.